Throughout my comic collecting life, there has been two major companies competing against each other. Sure, you also had random companies like Image or Dark Horse who would get a random surge of popularity, but after the dust settles, you're back with Marvel and DC. In my youth, I was firmly in the Marvel camp, though sometimes DC would have some really solid books. Most of my friends were also solidly in the Marvel camp, though a couple were DC fans. Now, I do want to make it clear, while I prefer Marvel, I love DC as well. I would definitely consider myself a fan of Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Nightwing, and to a lesser extent Flash and Aquaman. Now, 2 decades later, the question of Marvel or DC seems to be pertinent again, as I again find myself firmly in the Marvel camp over DC, except it's not comic books anymore, it's movies. Why is Marvel the biggest name in comic book movies? You ask anyone in the world to name 2 superheroes, almost unanimously the answer will be Batman and Superman. Sure, you'll probably get some Spider-Man sprinkled in there, but it's undebatable that Superman and Batman are the biggest names in superheroes, and they are both DC. So since DC has the 2 biggest names in comic books, why aren't they dominating the movies? Well, just look at the company's history with the movies. DC made Superman in 1978, and that movie got 3 sequels. They quickly followed it up with Batman, another movie that got 3 sequels. During this period, Marvel had Howard the Duck, The Punisher, Captain America, and a Fantastic Four film that never saw the light of day until the internet. The only work on screen that Marvel had that could take pride in was the television show The Incredible Hulk. But Marvel was always competitive. The X-Men animated series of the early 90s ingrained the group into a generation of kids, making them Marvel's most popular franchise for a while. Even with the success of X-Men, Marvel had financial difficulties. To combat this, they sold the film rights to many of their characters. Released in 2000, Bryan Singer's X-Men was the first obviously comic book movie released since Batman and Robin and Steel in 1997. And while we now want Fox to release their hold on the X-Men franchise so that Marvel can get the characters back, it's important to remember, without Fox placing faith in an X-Men movie franchise, Marvel Studios might have never happened. X-Men was produced by Fox, and was the movie that started Marvel's domination of the industry. Blade, X-Men, Blade 2, Spider-Man, Daredevil, X2, Hulk, all movies released based on Marvel properties after Steel and before League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Those 2 are both based on DC properties. DC didn't really seem to start focusing on any of their major superhero properties again until Batman Begins in 2005 and Superman Returns in 2006. And while both Begins and Returns made about the same amount of money at the box office, Begins cost quite a bit less to make and was also critically praised. At this time, Marvel was working on a different plan. Iron Man was like a lot of Marvel properties, sold in the late 90s and bouncing between different studios, none of which knew what to do with the character. In 2006, Marvel got the rights to the character and immediately began production on their own self-funded movie. The film would star troubled actor Robert Downey Jr. and be directed by Jon Favreau. The movie, despite not featuring one of Marvel's biggest heroes like Spider-Man or the X-Men, opened to nearly $100 million and was a huge success both financially and critically for the first-time studio. In 2007, Marvel also made a Hulk movie that was released a couple months after Iron Man and was met with less praise than its predecessor. But what made that film unique were the Easter eggs within it that not only linked Hulk to Iron Man, but also to Captain America. These clues that said perhaps we'd one day see an Avengers movie featuring Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and Edward Norton's Hulk lit the geek world on fire with speculation and anticipation. However, both films were completely overshadowed by another comic book film released that summer. The Dark Knight was a sequel to Batman Begins and featured the first incarnation of the Joker to be seen on the big screen in 19 years. Add to it, the Joker was played by the recently deceased Heath Ledger. The Dark Knight was the last film he completed before his untimely death in early 2008. The film broke new records and became the highest grossing comic book movie ever, the first comic book movie to gross over $1 billion. Marvel began work on Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, and the Avengers. Meanwhile, DC began work on a Dark Knight sequel, as well as a Green Lantern film. Throughout 2010 and 2011, Marvel released Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America the First Avenger. All received decent reviews, though not nearly as good as the original Iron Man. They also did well financially, but they certainly didn't break any records. 2011 also saw the release of Green Lantern, the film that DC promised would be the beginning of their cinematic universe. It was a critical and financial failure. Before release, Green Lantern was marred with rumors of production issues, most notably going over budget to implement CGI on everything they could. This gave the movie a very artificial look that likely turned off audiences, despite the fact that it's actually really good computer animation. But in 2011, audiences had become far too familiar with CGI, to the point where even if you use the best CGI, if you overuse it, it just looks fake. After the huge success of The Dark Knight, DC gave Christopher Nolan control of their next biggest franchise, Superman. Shortly afterwards, Zack Snyder was announced to direct. In 2012, Marvel released The Avengers. The movie had been hinted at through all of Marvel's previous movies, leading to a massive amount of excitement in the project. Joss Whedon wrote and directed the film, which was a huge gamble on Marvel's part. This was only Whedon's second feature film, and was his first with a major budget. Since bringing together a whole bunch of superheroes and pre-established franchises and forming a new group with them was something never done before, it was a huge gamble on almost all fronts. The Avengers smashed through The Dark Knight's previous record, grossing over $1.5 billion. It was praised by critics and fans, not as much as The Dark Knight, but was in the same league. Marvel had made their big gamble on a shared superhero universe, and it had paid off big time. The Dark Knight Rises came out a couple months after The Avengers, and was a massive success, actually slightly outperforming its predecessor in the box office, though it wasn't as critically praised as The Dark Knight. Even though this film was a huge success, The Avengers overshadowed it to such a degree, one could almost think The Dark Knight Rises somehow underperformed, which isn't true at all. What it showed was that a Batman solo movie can bring a massive amount of public interest, but not as much as a team of pre-established characters coming together can. The next year came Iron Man 3, which proved to be another huge success. All the Marvel Studios movies that featured characters who are Avengers saw a surge of interest in their post-Avengers movies. Iron Man 3 became the second most successful comic book movie of all time, grossing $1.2 billion. 10 years ago, the idea that an Iron Man movie had a chance of outgrossing a Batman movie would have seemed outrageous, but it happened. Not long after Iron Man 3, DC re-entered the field with Man of Steel, their Christopher Nolan produced, Zack Snyder directed reboot of Superman. The movie opened to what was possibly the most mixed reaction ever, right down to its Rotten Tomatoes score, which is almost right down the middle. Some people enjoyed it for its reinvention of the character. Others disliked it because of its reinvention of the character, rather than presenting us with a more traditional Superman. The neutral reviews didn't mean anything to DC at this point. They now realize they had completely dropped the ball. Warner Brothers owns the film rights to every single DC character. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, Aquaman, Green Arrow. All these characters that could have already had a shared universe. But rather than take the chance on building a solid, well thought out universe, DC sat around making their solo Superman and Batman movies. And now Marvel, with far less popular characters, was dominating the box office. Marvel was taking B and C-list characters and started investing money and talent into the properties, and thus upgrading them to A-listers. DC decided to build their cinematic universe out of Man of Steel in a mad scramble to catch up. In fall of 2013, Marvel and ABC aired Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a television series set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It started big but quickly lost interest. Its current ratings are pale in comparison to their premiere ratings, but it's still strong enough to keep going. This now begged the question, is the Arrow show in its second season perhaps set in the same universe as Man of Steel? DC dismissed this idea, instead choosing to set its television shows and its movies in separate universes. In 2014, Marvel released Captain America the Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. Both movies are considered some of the studio's best, and show that the studio is willing to invest large sums of money into movies that might have limited appeal, and in the case of Guardians, a movie with virtually no pre-built fan base. Both movies outperformed Man of Steel. Soon, DC will release Batman v Superman, and not long afterwards, we'll see Marvel's equivalent, Captain America Civil War, which could also be titled Captain America v Iron Man. And the fact that that it's even debatable that Captain America Civil War might make more money than Batman v Superman shows how far Marvel has come. Marvel has dominated DC with their superheroes, not because they have more popular heroes to use, but because they are willing to invest in solid stories that are true, at least, to the spirit of the heroes. DC, on the other hand, seems more interested in shoving as many heroes as possible into Batman v Superman, and rather than having their heroes be true to the spirit of their characters, they seem more interested in reinventing them. Fact is, Marvel is willing to take risks on their lesser-known properties, while DC is unwilling to even fully commit to a Wonder Woman movie, unless the character proves popular in Batman v Superman. And even though the Marvel movies are popular, they continue to take bigger and bigger risks by integrating all their television series into the same universe, a risk that DC is unwilling to make. This is absolutely tragic for DC fans. Yes, I have admitted I prefer Marvel Comics to DC, but doesn't mean I dislike DC. DC has just as many awesome characters as Marvel, but since they only seem interested in investing in Batman and Superman, their other great characters just get left at the wayside. It's absolutely outrageous that a character as popular as Wonder Woman has yet to get a live-action movie. I would even go so far as to say if Wonder Woman was a Marvel character, we undoubtedly would have gotten at least one live-action Wonder Woman by now. Marvel defeats DC not because they have better characters or better storylines. They are both equal in those respects. Marvel beats DC because they are willing to take their lower tier characters and invest time and talent into making them viable film franchises. They are willing to take a major superhero like Daredevil and rather than give him a huge film franchise, give him a quality Netflix series. How can DC possibly hope to beat Marvel until they're willing to invest time and talent into their most popular franchises that happen not to feature Batman or Superman? How can DC beat Marvel if they're unwilling to commit to television shows that help link their movies together? This is why Marvel beats DC, because Marvel cares about quality and understands if you do a quality job with your heroes, people will show up in droves to see them, whether the heroes had a large fan base or not. The old saying stands true to this day. If you want to win big, you have to risk big. Hey, if you like this video, please make sure to hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. And if you really love this video, consider visiting my Patreon page. Every video I make takes conservatively an average of 1 hour per minute for me to produce. And the ad revenue on these videos does not give me a very large return. So if you go to my Patreon and only want to contribute $1, that's just fine. That helps me out a lot. I plan on adding some new rewards, such as DVD box sets of my videos, as well as t-shirts. If there's other rewards you'd like to see happen, please let me know. For more information, make sure to visit my Patreon page.